ESLint is a tool for validating JavaScript code that you write in your code editor. Let's discuss what ESLint is, how it works, and then set it up inside of our code editor. First, though, let's do a quick demo just so we can figure out what ESLint really is and what it's doing for us. I want to convince you that this is an interesting tool that you should want to set up. So I've got some just arbitrary file here, just a single function. I declare the function and then I execute the function. So right now everything looks good. I don't appear to have any syntax errors. So okay, yeah, this looks pretty good. I'm going to introduce an error now inside my code, just a very subtle error. You'll notice that I am declaring a function called average and then I invoke it down here. So this subtle error that I'm going to introduce is I'm just going to rename this thing to capital A, average. And the instant I do, I get a whole bunch of red popping up inside my code editor. And if I hover over this error right here, I know the text is kind of small, but I'll read it for you. It says, average is defined, but never used. And then down here, average is not defined. And so both these error messages are very helpful for helping me just kind of figure out, hey, I just made a big typo within my code. I declared average with a capital A, but then when I try to use it, I've got lowercase a. So this function is, in theory, not defined. So this is the purpose of ESLint. It runs inside my code editor and it detects or recognizes whenever I make either a syntax error or an error like, basically reference a variable that does not exist. So I can fix this error up by going back to lowercase a and we're back to normal. Of course, ESLint does not only do trying to figure out if you're referencing a variable that doesn't exist, it'll also pick up on, say, a dangling operator like so. So I've got a dangling division sign here, and we get a nice error message that says, it looks like something right here went a little bit wrong, and we can, reasonably easy figure out that, okay, we probably made a mistake here. I also want the, divided by 2. Or let's say I misspell a return. All right, fantastic. Doing the same thing here as well. Just letting me know that I made a very subtle mistake that I should fix before I move on with my application. Okay, so that's what ESLint does. I hope that I've kind of given you an idea that yes, this is something that's useful, something you might want to use and set up inside your application. I used to look down on ESLint a little bit. I always thought personally like, well, if I'm a real engineer, I would be able to pick up typos like this before I try to run it in the browser. And that's not a very realistic attitude, And at the end of the day, everybody makes mistakes some number of the time. And the sooner you find and fix those mistakes, it just means you're all the more productive. So personally, I think that there's a lot of benefit to using ESLint and not a tremendous amount of downside. Let's change gears now and talk a little bit more about how ESLint works and how to set it up. So this is the one downside to ESLint. I'll tell you that right now. It's the one downside. Figuring out how the thing works and how to set it up is a little bit of a nightmare. And well, that's kind of evidenced by this really scary looking diagram that I've got on the screen now. So we're going to talk about exactly how ESLint works, at least on the kind of setup side of things. Do take note that I'm going to frame this discussion for using ESLint with our Atom code editor. So I use Atom. You might use Sublime or VS Code or WebStorm or Vim, whatever it might be. The setup for all of those different editors is going to be very similar, just some very slight differences. So again, let's just kind of frame the discussion in that regard. With ESLint, there's two phases of setup. There is editor-specific setup, which is kind of above this long line right here, and then there is project-specific setup as well. Oops. So we're going to jump around on this diagram just a little bit. We're going to start off first at the Atom editor up top, and then we're going to work our way down to the bottom here with this big box with all these rule things in here. So when we install Atom as our code editor, Atom has a fantastic ecosystem of different packages that we can download and install inside of Atom to enhance the behavior of the editor. One such plugin that we can install is called simply Linter. That's all it's called, not ESLint, it's just Linter. Linter is some underlying functionality inside of our code editor, inside of Atom in particular, that allows us to plug in, and that's kind of what I'm trying to symbolize here by this ESLint going into this white box right here. We can plug in different linters. So ESLint is not the only linting system out there. There are tons of other programming languages, and many other languages have linters of their own. So for Atom, we get this very generic, very multi-use case linter plugin that just has some idea of how to show errors to the user on the screen, and that's all it really does. So we have our linter plugin, and on top of that we will install ESLint. ESLint is the actual plugin, it's the actual module that parses our JavaScript code and applies some rules to it and tries to validate, hey, did they make a mistake in here? Did something go wrong? If so, I need to produce some type of error message and show it to the user. So that's the purpose of ESLint. It parses our JavaScript code and then it sources or creates the error messages to show to the user. So both the linter that we install and ESLint are what I kind of refer to as editor-specific settings. You install them once, like forever, and you're done. You just install linter once, you install ESLint once, and you're done. That's it. On the flip side are project-specific settings. So moving from project to project, maybe you've got a project at work, and then you've also got a project at home, like a side project. And your work project might be very legacy like ES5 code, but then the project that you're working at home might be cutting edge ES6, ES7, lots of really fancy syntax. So to accommodate for these different projects that you might have, you can wire up what I kind of refer to, I shouldn't say this is an official terminology, it's what I refer to as project-specific configuration. So we can configure ESLint and the rules that it uses to validate our JavaScript code on a per project basis. To set up ESLint on a very specific project, we will add in some amount of configuration for just a specific project. And we'll talk about exactly what form that takes when we set this up inside of our code editor. The purpose of this config file, it is a file that we create, is to tell ESLint that we want to use some number of rules to validate our JavaScript. So at the end of the day, when ESLint runs, ESLint by default, by itself, if you just install it and run it, it does absolutely nothing. There is no built-in validation inside of ESLint. You have to specify some number of rules that you want to use to say to ESLint, hey, when you're parsing everything and you're figuring out if anything's going wrong, please reference these rules. I want to make sure that the developer is following all these different rules. So if I flip back to Atom really quick, and let's say I remove a semicolon right here on line 2, I get an error message. And the error message, I know it's very small on the video, but you can see here very small, it says semi right here. So if I click on semi, it'll pop open my browser and it will take me to the rule called semi. Semi is all about making sure that you use semicolons within your code. So here's a good example right here. Hey, please make sure that you use semicolons, and you can read all the documentation and hear all about it. So for any project that we might be working on with ESLint, we will need to specify some number of rules. Now, of course, as a kind of end-line developer, you don't have to specify all these rules one by one. There are a ton of preset configurations out there online that you can just download and install. They will kind of bundle together a reasonable rule set of different validation rules, and you can just immediately start working without having to worry about, adding in 30 rules before you start actually writing any code. So for the config side of things, usually you will pull in some already pre-bundled set of rules to validate your JavaScript code. Okay, so that is how ESLint works, or at least again the setup side works in a nutshell. Let's continue in another video and talk about how we set up ESLint with a number of different code editors. In this section, we're going to walk through the setup of ESLint inside of the Atom code editor. So if you're not using Atom, you'll want to skip on to the next video that covers your very particular code editor. The setup for ESLint is different for each editor, and that's why we've got a series of different videos to explore how to set up ESLint with different editor. So with Atom, let's get started. I've opened up my Atom editor inside of a project directory here. And in our case, it is our React Native project. But it doesn't matter what type of project we're using ESLint with. It can be React Native, React.js, Ember, Angular, whatever it wants to be. Doesn't matter. So inside this project directory, I'm going to open up a single file called index.ios.js. Now the only reason I'm opening up this file is so that we can test out our linter and make sure it's working after we install it. So let's get started with the installation. Up at the very top left-hand side, I'm going to click on Atom, and then open up my editor preferences. Then on the left-hand nav bar inside the preferences pane, I will click on the install section. And then inside of install, we're going to search for a very particular package called linter-ESLint. The first result that I see here is the linter-ESLint package, and I will install it on the right-hand side. And then I'm also going to find the next package right beneath it that's called linter. If you don't see the next one on here as being linter, if it's anything else, then you can just do another search for the linter package itself and find it and install it. So we're also going to install linter as well. Okay, so installing these is going to take just a moment of time. So while that's occurring, we're going to flip over to our terminal and do another little bit of setup. I'm also going to pull up our diagram on how ESLint works right here. So at this point in time, we just started the installation of the linter attached to Atom and ESLint, the plugin that's going to run inside of the Atom editor as well. So now we need to install our configuration, some pre-built set of rules for our linter installation to run. So we're not going to write a rule set from scratch, we're just going to use one that has already been put together for us. So to install a already pre-generated or pre-built list of ESLint rules, in my project directory, I will install an npm module. So we'll install with npm install --save-dev. We're going to install this as a developer dependency. And then we're going to install ESLint-config-rally coding, like so. All right, so let's install this and just let it do its thing. And while that's going, I'll also check out my Atom preferences and just verify, okay, yep, both of them appear to have been installed successfully. So I don't need any more settings anymore, so I'll close the settings pane at the top. And I'm going to go back over to my terminal and just verify that this installation is going to wrap up here in just a second. Okay, well, that's just going to take forever. So while that's going, the last step for setup that we have to do is we have to make sure that ESLint knows to use that rule setup or that rule bundle that we just installed via npm. To tell ESLint that we want it to use that bundle of rules, we're going to add a configuration file to our project. So inside of my project directory, I'm going to create a new file called .eslintrc. So dot, make sure you get that dot on the front, ESLint-rc. So any setup that we want to do for ESLint for this particular project, we add to this file right here. Remember, this is going into the realm of project-specific settings. So on every project that I start off where I want to use ESLint, I will need to add an ESLint-rc file. Again, this is project-specific setup. So inside of here, we'll do a little bit of project-specific setup. First, I'll add on a set of curly braces to specify an object. And then we're going to put in inside of, very specifically, double quotes, the word extends with the key of rally coding, like so. Make sure that you've got double quotes on both extends and rally coding. So what this tells ESLint is to go and find a install dependency inside the node modules directory, which is what we just installed, called rally coding. So we just installed, and it looks like it just wrapped up successfully. We just installed an ESLint config called specifically rally coding. So we're just telling ESLint, hey, go use that configuration that we just downloaded. All right, so now the last step, I'm going to close out the ESLint file. I'm going to close out the indexios.js file and then reopen it. And then once I reopen it, my ESLint, my linter should be active. So if I start deleting some code, you'll see that I start getting some error messages popping up on the screen. Specifically, in this case, I just deleted the semicolon, so it says, hey, you're missing a semicolon, you can't do that. But then we can also start doing weird stuff like, I don't know, how about plus, 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 plus. And yep, that looks good. It says parsing error unexpected token because we did a bunch of pluses in a row here. Okay, so that's it with ESLint inside of Atom. That's all the setup we have to do. The one thing to keep in mind is that on any future project where you want to use ESLint, you have to create the ESLint RC file, paste in this configuration, and then you also need to install the ESLint config rally coding package as well. Remember, this package right here just contains a list of different rules to tell ESLint how it should validate our code. Okay, so that's our setup. Let's get continued in the next section. In this section, we're going to go through the installation of ESLint on Sublime Text 3. So specifically Sublime Text 3, Sublime Text 2, as far as I know, is not supported with ESLint. So this is all going to be for setup with ESLint 3. So unfortunately, Sublime has a little bit of a hefty amount of setup here. So these are all the steps we have to go through. And yes, it is slightly painful. To be honest with you, this is the third time I've recorded this section, so the last 2 times I made a tiny mistake. Hopefully no repeats this time, no repeats. We're gonna get through this in one go. All right. So first well, you know what? I don't know how much sense there is to talk about all this installation here. Basically, getting ESLint set up with Sublime just involves installing a bunch of junk. Let's just get started on it and go through the process. So first, we are going to install ESLint globally with npm. So at my terminal, I'm inside my project directory, and I'm going to install the ESLint command line tool. Okay, so the command line tool is what actually parses and validates our code. We will execute npm install -g ESLint. So this is going to install the ESLint package globally, as indicated by the -g right here. This is going to take a little bit to run, so let's continue with the rest of the installation while that goes. The next thing we're going to do is install package control. Package control is a package manager for Sublime Text 3, so it's just something that's going to allow us to easily install other packages. To install package control 3, I'm going to open up my browser and I'm going to navigate to packagecontrol.io/installation. Then once here, on the left-hand side, we're going to go through the simple installation process, which really is pretty straightforward. I'm going to copy this big block of text right here, everything from the import statement to the write by at the bottom. So I'll hit Command-C to copy it. Now I'll go back over to Sublime Text, and I need to paste this into Sublime's console. So I'll go up to the View tab at the top. I'll click Show Console, and then I will paste it all in here, everything that we just copied. So the very last token in here will be write by. Then I'll hit Enter, and this will install package control for us. Now I've already got package control installed, so I am not really doing any additional installation here. You'll want to make sure that it just completes installing. It should only take a second or two. So next, we've got our package control installed. We are going to install a configuration for ESLint with npm. So this config part that we're about to do right here is all about this last half. The last half on our diagram. Remember, we have some per project setup that we have to do. So what we're about to do is the per project setup. It's going to be the actual configuration that tells ESLint, hey, when you parse the code and make sure it's valid, please use this set of rules to figure out what is going on. So back at my terminal, I'll take note, looks like ESLint is all done installing. We're going to install some configuration for ESLint. So we'll run npm install --save-dev ESLint config rally coding, like so. So ESLint -config -rally coding. So we'll hit enter and let this thing do its little installation, and then we'll keep working while that goes. Just installing that configuration inside of our project, that set of rules isn't enough. We have to actually tell ESLint to make use of that setup or that list of rules. So to tell ESLint to use that set of rules, we're going to create a new configuration file inside of our root project directory. So inside of my root project directory, I'm going to make a new file called .eslint.rc, and I'll save it. So now I've got a new file inside of my root project directory called .eslint.rc, and it's completely empty. Inside of here, we're going to put just a little bit of configuration. I'm going to place a set of curly braces. And then inside the curly braces, I'll add in extends rally coding. So again, this tells ESLint, hey, we just installed a set of configuration for you. Please use the configuration called rally coding. Do take note that you must use double quotes around each word here. So double quotes around extends and double quotes around rally coding as well. All right, so just 2 more steps. We're almost there, almost there. We have now added in our config with npm. We have actually skipped to the bottom. We added in the config file to our project. So the last 2 things to do are we're going to use the package control module that we just installed to install linter and ESLint to Sublime Text. So back inside of our project, I'm going to install or use package control to install those 2 modules. First, I'll open up the command palette by pressing Command-Shift-P. And this opens up the command palette. So this is a list of all the things I can do with Sublime Text. I'm going to search for install and then click on the install package section. This will do a little bit of loading and then show me a list of all the different packages that I can install. First, we're going to look for Sublime Linter. And I'll find the first result right here is just Sublime Linter. I will click it to install it. And there we go, nice and installed. And next I'll open up the command palette again with Command-Shift-P. I will click on Install Package again. And then this time around, we are going to look for Sublime Linter -contrib -ESLint. So Sublime Linter -contrib -ESLint. So here's the result right here, and I'll click it to install it. And I'll click out that message right there. Okay, so last step, I'm going to close out Sublime Text entirely. So I just quit entirely from it, and I'm going to start it back up. And I got my project folder still open right here. So last thing we have to do is just test this out and make sure it works. I'm going to open up this index.ios.js file, and I'm going to delete a semicolon here at the end, and I'm going to save the file. And you'll notice, yep, sure enough, I get this error message popping up. It says here, missing semicolon, the rule is semi. If you don't see this little red dot over here and the red square pop up, do make sure that you save the file and also try changing the line that your cursor is on. Inside of Sublime Text, the linter is a little bit laggy, and so sometimes it takes a second for it to realize, oh hey, you just fixed the error. So you'll notice that when I delete the semicolon, we're waiting, oh, there's an error here. And then when I fix it, we're waiting, and okay, there it goes. Okay, so there is ESLint set up with Sublime Text. I know, not the easiest thing in the world to do. In the future now, whenever you want to use ESLint with Sublime Text, you can create this .eslint.rc file right here, paste in this rule, and then make sure that you just run at the terminal that npm install --save dev ESLint config rally coding. That's all you have to do. So in the future, no more complicated setup. It's a one-time thing. Okay, so we've got ESLint set up with Sublime Text. Let's continue in the next section. In this section, we're going to go through the installation of ESLint on top of VS Code. So if you're using Visual Studio Code, you're in the right place. Let's go through the installation. I'm inside of my project directory, and I've currently got open the index.ios.js file. Now we've only got this file open just to verify that ESLint works after we actually install it. So let's go through the installation. The first thing we're going to do is flip over to our terminal, and I'm inside the project directory right now, and I'm going to install ESLint globally. So I'll run npm install -g ESLint. This is going to take a minute to install, so while this is going, we'll flip back over to Visual Studio Code and do a little bit more setup over here. On the left-hand side, I'm going to find my Packages button, and I'm going to install an extension called ESLint. So I'll just search for ESLint. I see it as the first and only result in here, and we can just click Install. After I install it, I will enable the extension, I'm going to be prompted to restart my editor. No problem, let's do it. And we're back. So here we go. I'm going to flip back over really quick to my terminal. It looks like that global installation of ESLint is complete. This global installation of ESLint is used to do the actual parsing of the code that we write. So that is why we installed that. The second package that we need to install really quickly is the actual rule set that we're going to use to validate the JavaScript that we actually write. So remember, by default, ESLint does nothing for us. We have to give it a default rule set. So I'm going to install a bundle of rules that's already been written for us using npm. I'll execute npm install -- save dev ESLint config rally coding. So I've got ESLint -config rally coding. And we'll let this thing install itself. This is also going to take a moment to install. So while it's doing that, we'll do one last piece of startup. I'm going to flip back over to Visual Studio Code really quick, and I'm going to make a new file inside of my project directory. So I'm going to make a new file called .eslint.rc. So .eslint.rc. And then inside of here, we are going to tell ESLint that we want it to use that rule set that we just installed with npm. So I will add in a new object. Oh boy. All right, well that's legible. There we go. And then inside this object, I'm going to put a set of double quotes. Make sure you're using double quotes. You cannot use single quotes. You got to use double. Extends rally coding. So both extends and rally coding are wrapped with double quotes like so. Now I'll just save this. Let's see how our installation is going. Yep, it looks like the installation is all done. So the last thing I'm going to do is test this out inside of that index.ios.js file. Let's try by just taking out a semicolon or two, and immediately I get an error message popping up. And I can put the semicolon back on, and we're back in business. Or I can delete the entire first line, and now we get a whole bunch of big errors popping up on the screen. So it definitely looks like we've successfully got ESLint working inside of VS Code. Let's continue in the next section.